Welcome to this webinar on overcoming nerve damage. My name is Garrett Murren and I'm a representative of Radiant Life Technologies, and we're putting on this webinar today to talk about neuropathy, which is the same word as overcoming nerve damage. Now, for many of you, what I'm going to present here today is in all likelihood going to be something you are not aware of. And what it's going to do, it's going to change how you view neuropathy. It's going to change how you approach neuropathy, and it's also going to change how you tackle neuropathy. And the webinar is specifically made for anyone who wants to learn about neuropathy in this way, who's suffering from neuropathy or knows someone, or is interested in learning in and of itself. So now I think it's fair to give a friendly warning at this point, in the sense of once you see this, you can't unsee it, all right? Because most of people who suffer with neuropathy, or a good number, they've heard at some point or another, nothing can be done. But the question is this true? So today what we're going to explore, because so many people have heard about this, we're going to explore the possibilities with chromotherapy, because today we're also going to talk about a medical technology to give us context and practicality in the context of this challenge of neuropathy. So we're going to talk about chromotherapy. That's going to be the lens we're going to view this through. So when you look here on the screen, you'll see all of these different nerves that are implicated. And these are real life people, real life situations, real life challenges. And we're going to use these to illustrate how it is possible to overcome nerve damage, neuropathy. Now, obviously, this cross section of different nerves and people's circumstances, some of it, well, let's put it this way. You may or may not relate to some of it, all of it, or none of it, in terms of your particulars and their particulars. And this is because when you look at neuropathy, there's a whole host of different symptoms. So we're going to present some here today that you may or may not relate to. And if you look here, as it says, this list is not exhaustive. And on top of all of these symptoms, if you look, there's even more diagnoses. There's literally hundreds of diagnoses that go with these symptoms. And so this is part of the reason why it can often be not only confusing, but it can often be difficult and complicated to navigate neuropathy and contend with it, okay? So the first place we're going to start here, we're going to look at a paradigm, all right? We're going to use this word paradigm. So here we have these treatment paradigms. And what I mean by a paradigm, if you look at a paradigm, it's simply a lens. So it's a particular way of looking at the world around us. And it sets up kind of what we expect to be true. And it also will kind of condition the way we think about things. And then for sure, it's going to kind of condition us in how we view solutions, where we look, and what we would expect to see as possible, normal, okay? Now, when you look here, we're talking about control as a paradigm. So you take a typical, you have a problem, you have neuropathy, nerve damage, you go to the doctor. He or she is going to do everything they can to ease the symptoms, all right? So they're going to try to give some pain medication to, let's say, turn the volume down on those signals. And at the same time, they're going to go to work to find out what's causing this. Like, what is the challenge here? What's going on? And here we come back, of course, to these diagnoses. Your doctor, he or she, is going to be looking to tackle these diagnoses, because the way it works, they want to prevent further damage to see what, to let the nerve recover, all right? Now, the other thing that goes with this paradigm is what we would call replace. So if you look here, now this is a very, very specific situations. Let's say a nerve was cut, cleanly cut. They'll get in, they'll try to sew it back together. And this is with thread finer than a human hair, okay? Now, or they'll take a nerve from another part of a body or another part of your body, and they'll put it in very tiny a bit, okay? So has limited application. But in both of these, there's an unspoken message, because if you look at this, let's say you go to your doctor, they give you pain relief medication, they find out what the damaging factor is, and they're able to remove it. They say, okay, we're going to remove the damaging factor. And then they say, wait, let's wait and see. Or if you get the surgery, they say, okay, we did the surgery, now let's wait and see. And behind that, there's a certain message. All right? And what that message looks like, if you look at this, it's implicit. It's not necessarily explicitly said, but it's implicit. So when we look at that, what we see is if nerve self-repair can overcome recent and minor damage, there'll be recovery. So what we mean is, let's remove the, let's say, toxin. Let's soothe the symptoms, and let's see if the nerve can self-repair and bring things back to normal. Same thing with the replace. Let's do the surgery, and then let's wait and see if the nerve self-repair can be resumed. And to whatever degree it can be resumed, there will be a degree of recovery. And it's the same with the control. If they can remove the damage, now you note here it says minor and recent. And there's a reason that's there, and we'll get into it a little more. And then there's something about these, let me just paint it this way. Actually, this is a good point to tell a story, because I want to clarify something. I was once challenged, someone said, well, you know, you said, my doctor said nothing can be done, and you said there is something can be done, so are you saying my doctor's a liar? And I said, gosh, no, absolutely not. You see, because in this paradigm, as I said, it conditions how we see solutions. So in this paradigm, what we do, we alleviate symptoms. Then from there, we address the cause as best we can. And then we wait and see. And in that wait and see, there's only two possibilities. Either something's going to improve or something's going to get worse. And once those actions are taken, there's nothing more that can be done. It's absolutely true. There's, you know, this makes perfect sense when we view neuropathy in this light. But this isn't the only way to view neuropathy. And this is where we're going to start to look at what I said earlier, this new approach, new view, new way to tackle neuropathy, okay? So if you look here, what we're saying is, yes, it's true in the control paradigm. Once the wait and see process is over, nothing more can be done. But what we're saying is, what about if we get in there and directly enhance the nerve's own ability to self-repair? I mean, it makes sense. They're waiting. We're waiting generally for it to happen spontaneously. So what if we could get in there and actively do something to enhance it? I mean, it only makes sense, okay? And this is the new lens. This is this new paradigm, new for you paradigm, though I'll show you in a minute, it's not actually new. And we're going to use, as you see here on the screen, we have coma therapy, all right? This is the lens, part of the lens through which we're going to view this in terms of directly enhancing the nerve's own ability to self-repair. Now, I want to acknowledge here too that when you take control and replace, there's nothing wrong with these. The support can work in conjunction with either one of these, and actually it would be smart to put this in conjunction with them, because it's going to be another method to ensure we work toward outcomes that better people's lives. So with the support paradigm, one of the things, there's a number of factors actually. So you'll note here, for acute or chronic nerve damage, for any cause of nerve damage and for any severity of nerve damage, with one very important qualifier: as long as some nerve fibers are alive. And what we're going to do now, we're going to go, let's say, down to the cell level. We're going to look at the neurons, the nerve cells, and let's look at this in terms of, you see, there's this natural process, continuous process going on. This is the headquarters, okay? And this is the outpost, just to keep it simple. This headquarters lives in your spine, at the very side of your spine. This is the nerve root. And this is a neuron, and it goes right from the nerve root, in this instance, we'll say, for example, right down to your toe. And now if you think of a cell just for a second, we're used to thinking cells microscopic, but your nerve is actually, this one here will be like 3 feet long, depending on how tall you are. One single cell, 3 feet long. So you can imagine the headquarters having to coordinate to get the signals down and the signals back. Anyway, we'll get into that more later. But what's happening here is, in terms of signals, the average nerve is sending, let's say, 25 signals a second back and forth, okay? And with that, there's wear and tear. Just like anything, if we're doing anything in life, there's wear and tear. So we have normal function, the nerve is functioning normally, and there's another process that's always going on, which is self-repair. And that self-repair is always functioning to keep the cell functioning normally. And we could say they're about 50-50, okay? And you look at this scale, they stay balanced. 50-50 in terms of energy for self-repair and energy for normal function. All right? Now, if there's a minor damage, this can recover very quickly, no problem. Self-repair is active. But what happens when we get, let's say, some toxin or something happens in the environment or anything like that? So, excuse me, you'll have something that'll damage the nerve, okay, this nerve cell. And remember, now we talked about the wait and see. So when this damage happens, wait and see is to see, will this self-repair be able to offset the damage and return things to normal? And this is why they'll work to remove whatever the damaging factor is, to try and support this self-repair, okay? Now, here too, something I think is important to point out is this damaging factor, if left unaddressed, will continue to cause havoc. But when we get into actively enhancing self-repair, what we can do is restore function. All right, you'll see here we enhance the self-repair, and through that, and remember, this is a process that's already happening, okay, all the time. The cell is always self-repairing. So all we're doing is nothing weird here. We're just simply increasing the efficiency. We're enhancing the process that's already happening, all right? Now remember, the control paradigm is just saying, okay, well, we're going to wait to see if this can happen spontaneously. We're saying, well, let's not just wait. Let's get in and actively do something here. Now, as I said, this is probably new for most of you, but this isn't actually new at all, because when we look at this, this is a field that's been 20th century, very well developed in the 20th century, and now in the 21st century, more and more coming into the fore. We'll say coming into what we call the middle of the road. Because you take, let's say, for example, low-level laser therapy. That started in 1964, so 60 years, and now a lot of people have actually heard of low-level laser therapy. It took 60 years for that to move from being something nobody knows about, except for very few people, to more and more people know about, and it becomes more and more prolific in our society. And so with that, as I said, there's nothing new, but what is new is in the 70s, they discovered that if they combine, let me actually go back a slide here, because there's something I didn't say that I should talk about. When we look here, we have this title, Enhancing Nerve Self-Repair with Low-Level Radiances, because this is this field that's been developing. And what this means is these low-level radiances are, as you see in the picture, things like low-level laser, phototherapy, magnetic field therapy, and ultrasound therapy as examples. All right, and those are at very low power levels. And what that means is there's no possibility for those to harm or damage any cells. All right, so this is what we mean when we say low-level radiances. Okay, so when I say the new, in the 70s they discovered if we put these radiances, if we take them and we put them together, what happens is there's a certain synergy that's created, and that synergy makes them even more effective than when they're on their own. And in 2009, chromotherapy was developed, and this is the development, the further continuation of that synergy, where now we combined, back here they combined two. They combined magnetic field and laser, and in some cases red light. And now with chromotherapy, we found a way to combine all of these previously mentioned low-level radiances in one therapeutic medical device. And so what that looks like, we'll just have a look. We'll go back to this picture here. Now, this is down at the cell level. Remember I talked about the headquarters? So you're looking at the headquarters of the neuron. And you'll see here on the screen we have the radiances, the ultrasound, the magnetic field, the infrared laser, and the color light therapy. And these are all acting together as one on the cell. Now, I don't want to talk about a cell in terms of transport, energy, and messaging, because we're not here to learn biology. So let me relate it in terms of something we're all familiar with. If you picture this as a house, okay, and some damage happened to your house, you need to repair the damage. So you can picture you need to start calling up, you have to send messages to get different companies in to do different parts of the repair work. You need to have workers, energy to do the work, and a lot of materials are going to need to be transported in and transported out. And the cell has same basic needs. It's not much different. I mean, of course you get into the minutiae of it and it's very complicated, but in essence it's the same thing. And now when you look here at this animation, you can picture this is the skin surface, and this is a camera device laid on the skin surface. Let's say it's laid at the root of the spine, where this nerve cell headquarters is, and these radiances are penetrating this volume of tissue and thereby supporting, enhancing that self-repair of the nerve. And now I said earlier about the synergy. You see, one of the things, and I won't go into this in any detail, is by combining these radiances, the outcome is greater than the sum of the parts. Let's just put it that way to keep it very simple. Meaning the effect of enhancing this nerve self-repair gets optimized in a very significant way. Now, I've been talking about this therapy, and I'm going to talk about it when we get into real people's situations. So I'm just going to show you a picture of it, okay, of different people putting it on their body in different ways. So now we're going to get into real life situations. And this case is a gentleman, he's suffering from radiculopathy. So that just means that in his spine, okay, the nerves are being compressed. But he didn't find this out right away. This came much later. So he's a 69-year-old male, and as we said, cervical disc herniations C5 through 7. That's just technical stuff for in his spine. So I won't talk about the technical things as we go through. They're there when you want to review later. They're there for you to review. So when he goes to see Dr. Willix, he's got numbness in his fingers, okay? And he has this thing they call complete thenar atrophy. So what that means, there's a muscle here in his thumb, and that muscle is wasted away. And he's not able to actually move his thumb to touch his other fingers. And not only that, he's in a lot of pain, okay? Because what happened was, this started a long time ago. First it started with his wrist, all right? And they said, well, looks like you have carpal tunnels. He's like, okay. And then later, they said, well, he's like, gee, my shoulder is really bothering me. They said, well, it seems like you have rotator cuff. And then only, just before he went to see Dr. Willicks, did he find out through MRIs and stuff that he actually had compressed nerves. So the nerves are being squeezed, and the damaging factor is this, okay? Now, I want to point out here too, just for a second, if you think about that nerve, the headquarters is here, and it's got to move everything down to the fingers. This is the first area to suffer, generally speaking, and then the suffering moves up this way toward here. So things can look differently, and over time they can change from when they started, okay? Now, this gentleman was very motivated, because they said once they found out about the herniated discs, and they said, look, we want to do surgery. And he wasn't that keen on going to get surgery, so he started to look around for other possibilities. And so I showed you the device. So what we're talking about here is, if we're enhancing that self-repair, is treating the nerve pathway. And we call this the three-principle approach, but we'll get into that more later. So you can picture treating up here at the headquarters, and then following the nerve pathway down from where it is in the neck, then underneath the arm, following the nerve pathway, then down here, and then scanning the hand, both front and back, okay? Now, what this started to do, you can see the recovery process. Excuse me, very sensitive mouse. They did this over 7 sessions, over 5 weeks. And as I showed, they were targeting these different areas of the nerve pathway down to his hand. And he also went for, Dr. Willicks wanted them to get gentle chiropractic traction. Simply means gently pulling on his spine to relieve the pressure on those pinched nerves, we'll say, all right? And as I just showed you, the nerve pathway, treatment pathway. So after the first session, he had a definite improvement in his hand strength. Now, this gentleman was used to physical exercise, being at the gym all his life, so very familiar lifting weights and these things, about the strength in his hands. So he noticed it immediately. It was only a very small change, but he noticed it immediately. And that kind of motivated him, we'll say. After the second session, he could oppose all of his fingers to his thumb. So this muscle started to return, okay? It started to rebuild itself. You can picture that self-repair, all right? Now, after 5 months, sessions 5 to 6, completely pain-free and off all the medications. And after 5-month follow-up, he's back to the gym. He did not need to get surgery, okay? So for him, he found what he was looking for. And why I wanted to show you this case is because, you see, different people are motivated by different things. This gentleman, as we said, motivated by not wanting surgery. And another thing to show you here too, or to talk about anyway, if you picture that function improving from the treatments, the scales are starting to tip, all right? And that's a lot different than when you take pain medications. So with pain medications, what you're doing, you're basically dampening the signal. It doesn't do anything to directly repair the nerve. And this is a very important distinction, because secondarily, yes, if you can sleep, that's going to be a huge benefit. So it's very important. Nobody's saying they're not important to take those medications. But they're not directly affecting the nerve's self-repair. Whereas when we get in and do this is not the same at all, because what we're actually doing, we're not turning down, dampening any pain signals. We're simply enhancing that nerve's self-repair. And as its function increases, it actually starts to regulate and send normal signals. So the pain goes down as a result of a functional increase rather than turning off a pain signal by blocking something with a pain medication. I want to point out that's a very important distinction, okay? Now, this next one says median neuropathy post-surgery. So this lady, Vanya, at the time of this, she's 41 years old. Now, right-handed professional cook, very important, because she was having carpal tunnel issues, went for surgeries on her right hand, 2 in fact, and it didn't go well. So she ended up basically, they said, sorry, let's say at the end of the surgeries, remember, wait and see, let's see, because after surgery, a lot of people, they'll have some, not big complications, but discomfort, different things, and it could be big complications like for Vanya. And in the control paradigm, to say, okay, well, let's wait and see, because it can recover spontaneously. But in her case, it continued to degrade to the point where they said, we're sorry, you're permanently disabled. There's nothing more we can do. And they're being very truthful, as we said earlier. So she's, perhaps not that happy about this situation. So this creates opportunity for her, because now she starts to look, actively look, is there anything else that can be done? And when we look here, for us, why we're showing this case is because it creates this question, is recovery possible after surgical complications? And then not only that, you picture a right-handed cook with a knife in her right hand. She doesn't need just basic functions, she needs all the fine motor functions back. Is it even possible? And Dr. Zleta just was honest with her. He said, I don't know what's possible. No promise, no guarantee, but let's explore this unknown territory. And I'm emphasizing the unknown territory very specifically, and we'll come back to that, okay? And I mean, you could picture from the surgeries, there's scarring there. So anyway, we may come back to the scarring. I just want to mention that for now. For the treatment, much the same as the gentleman before. So this was what we would have done with Vanya, Dr. Zleta would. And you can see here, hour plus every session. And instead of a very short duration recovery as the previous gentleman, took several months for Vanya. And it wasn't a straightforward process, because she had periods where let's say she was feeling better, and then relapse, and then feeling better, and then relapse. And we'll get into more details about that later, but just to show you, as the nerve function recovers, it can be erratic. Pain can change shape, location, feel, texture, whatever it is. And you can see that scale. If you picture the scale again, it's trying to find a balance. It's trying to, the self-repair is trying to outweigh the damaging factor. And when it comes to that scar tissue, that is needing to be resolved along the way as well. The nerve is needing, and the tissues around it are needing to resolve it, okay? And we can enhance that process as well. So with that, for Vanya, complete pain relief and full wrist movement restored, okay? And not only that, but fine motor function back. You can picture how fast they chop stuff in the kitchen, handling heavy pots, different things like that. And she was able to return to work. And this was after she was told nothing can be done, okay? So wanted to show you that, because there are possibilities. Doesn't mean everyone's going to have this success, but it comes back down to that key question. Is there still viable nerve tissue remaining? And if there is, if we enhance that self-repair, what can happen? And for Vanya, she's back to work. Now this lady, 25 plus years, uncontrolled diabetes, meaning her blood sugar is up, down, okay? Now, what brought her to the doctor is she had an eye hemorrhage. And that alarmed her, because she lost part of her visual, like it impaired her vision quite a bit apparently. So this is something, we're not going to get into this in big detail, but autonomic neuropathy, a little bit, it's still peripheral neuropathy, nerves outside of, in your body, outside of the central nervous system. But maybe next webinar, we'll get into this in more detail. But for now, what I want to point out here is this is widespread throughout her body. I mean, just to simply say, and then you have a bunch of symptoms that show up with that. She's depression, high blood pressure, gastrointestinal issues. She has to urinate frequently at night. And obviously what brought her in, what alarmed her to go seek medical attention is the eye hemorrhage, okay? Now, for us, why I'm showing this is what happens if we stabilize a system? What can happen? What about, will it improve quality of life? Because she's got quite a few things going on, and let's say the eye hemorrhage, just the straw that broke the camel's back that got her there. And what happens if we address the underlying nerve dysfunction? Because with autonomic neuropathy, it can start to be much more than just the limbs and start to affect a lot of organ function. Very serious, can be. So if we address that underlying nerve dysfunction, what about those separate symptoms? So she was at the clinic, Dr. Klassen, and they did coma sessions twice daily. Apparently she lived close by, for 1 week. So she'd come twice a day for 1 week. So they treated her, let's say, circulatory system, all right? Then they treated her, what we would call her, right here would be her pancreas, which is part of the important part for diabetes. So part of the, let's say, damaging factor. We're able to address that to some degree. And then treating her enteric nervous system. Again, we'll get into that in more detail at some other point. Of course, also addressing her eyes along the way, but centrally treating her whole peripheral nervous system. You can see all the points down in the middle of the spine and all along the sides of the spine, okay? And as I said, treating her eyes. Now, important note, eyes closed anytime you're doing these kind of treatments. So with that, she continued her medications as normal, by the way. So her blood glucose managed to go down from, let's say, yo-yoing as it was to more stable, not ideal, but more stable. No change in medication. So you can see this indicates a functional recovery of the system. The enhanced self-repair is bringing some functional recovery for that whole system. And you can see nighttime urination down to 1 to 2 times a night. That's actually pretty normal for people when they're older. Blood pressure improved. She didn't feel depressed anymore. Gastrointestinal issues. So this is system-wide improvement. And this also touches on this 3-principle approach, which I'll show you a little more later. This is another aspect of it, okay? And also note, this lady, you know, it's not like she's out of the woods, so to speak. It's more that there's progress, all right? And that state of her nerves having a huge impact on her overall quality of life. So enhancing self-repair, lots of ripples. So this is part of the reason we wanted to show you this. Now, next is a lady, Marina, and she has post-herpetic neuralgia. So shingles, herpes zoster, okay? Excruciating pain down her leg on the right side. And she can't walk. In fact, her husband apparently had to carry her around, and he carried her to Dr. Zledev to get treatment. They attempted all kinds of different things at the hospital. She'd been hospitalized multiple times. Every pain med they could try, nothing worked. Okay, so they fortunately are motivated to find, and they found Dr. Zledev. I mean, not fortunate situation, but fortunate they found him. And it brings up this question, when you don't know what the underlying cause is, or you can't relieve, in this case, what the underlying cause is, because can you do any self-repair? What happens? Can you do it? And so when you look at this, they did treatment, 7 consecutive days of coma sessions, so every day for 7 days. and they used the Cumra 980 nanometer laser. And they applied it at the, as we showed earlier, the root of the nerve, the headquarters, along the pathway, and then along the rash where she was experiencing the outbreak. Now note here, they're not touching the rash with Cumra therapy. They're scanning. I'll just show here on my hand. They're just scanning over the skin, let's say, holding it half an inch or a few centimeters above the skin, because you don't want to aggravate that, all right? Now, again, I want to point out, this is not the same as a medication to get rid of the rash, because Cumra therapy, enhancing the nerve's self-repair, it's not dealing with the virus at all. It's not like it takes the virus away. What it does is enhance the nerve's self-repair, and then the nerve can resolve the let's say, the challenging factor with the zoster. Because the zoster is only going to happen if the system goes really low in terms of your reserves go really low. It's kind of opportunistic. But Cumra, is not directly aimed at that. All right? And again, the pain relief is not at all the same as dampening or masking symptoms here. It's that functional improvement through the self-repair. So she got relief after only 2 sessions and complete recovery after that week. And the follow-up for the next 2 years, no relapse, all right? So wanted to show you this because this viral cause remains and the nerve pain is fully resolved, okay? So there's a functional improvement. Next we have femoral neuropathy. So this is a young girl, 14 years old. And you can see here dysfunction of the right femoral nerve. Now just to say, the femoral nerve, if you're not familiar, runs down the front of your leg, inside of your leg, rather than the back of the leg. Most people are familiar with, have heard sciatic nerve, but maybe not femoral nerve, so just to mention that. Now this is a case where they don't know. They diagnose and they say, they call it idiopathic, means we don't know what's causing it. Yet the effect is still happening because this girl, she's basically, they say skin and bone, because when you look at her leg, the muscle is wasting away, all right? And not only that, is painful and difficult to walk. So she's having sensation symptoms and motor symptoms as a result of whatever is happening with her femoral nerve. So in this instance, when we look at, let's say, opportunity for what we're looking at here, we know the nerve is still alive, because if there's pain, the nerve is sending a signal. And as long as that nerve is alive, there's hope, okay? There's opportunity anyway, there's opportunity. And with that, as we said, pain means that's still working, and the motor function, she can still have some movement motor function, but not a lot. So we know the motor nerve is also still alive. So because they're there, can we support the self-repair? Can we enhance that without knowing the extent or the cause of the damage? All right? So this happened every second day for 3 months. This is over her summer holidays, apparently. So she spent her summer in this condition. And this was done alongside of rehabilitation physiotherapy. Now, specifically, I want to mention that because you can use the support paradigm in conjunction with anything else you're doing to help care for yourself with neuropathy, whether it's physiotherapy, whether it's with pain medications, whether it's nutrition, whatever it is, you can use them together, okay? And so for her recovery progress, she had complete pain and motor impairment resolution. Now she's 14 years old, so they went through the wait and see. And because a lot of people, when they're young, they have a lot of reserves to recover. But still, she needed to have enhanced self-repair to get to the recovery. And they could see, not only was the pain and motor impairment resolved, but they could actually see the thigh growing in size again, back to normal. It wasn't quite to normal, that's why we say progress. It's not resolved. And then, the doctors at the hospitals were quite impressed, because the story behind this is this family went everywhere to try and find out what's wrong, which makes sense. Control paradigm, everyone's used to it. We all know about it. Let's find out what the cause is. If we eliminate the cause, then it should resolve itself. But they didn't know what the cause was. But this family went back to the doctors they had seen previously. So that's why this comment is here, okay? Now, next we have this lady. She's 59 years old, and she's a medical doctor and also a physiotherapist. So she has 2 different degrees, very schooled in these areas and worked in them for like 30 odd years. So what happened for her, she had a hip replacement surgery, and when they were doing an emergency situation came up, and they accidentally cauterized her sciatic nerve when that happened. Now she came out of that operation with 7 to 10 out of 10 pain. 10 out of 10 pain is go unconscious from the pain level, okay? And then in addition to that, she also had most of the function below her knee wasn't working, all right? Now, she also lived on morphine for 6 months after that surgery to try and do something to alleviate the pain to some degree. And she had to live with crutches, and she couldn't lift her leg, her foot dropped, all kinds of different things. Now, because she's a physiotherapist and medical doctor, she ran rehab programs, so she knew everything about them. And she went through the two, one state one and one private one, and they provided little improvement. Now, this case, because she went through those programs, she's a medical doctor, she documented before she came to COMRA and then after. So she, as I said, 6 months before she found COMRA. In other words, why we're mentioning this is, we don't always know how long something's been going on for people before they start to enhance self-repair. But in this case, it's very clear, because it was an accident, how long the situation. Whereas some people, like that gentleman, the first one, who's 69 years old, this had been going on for quite a long time. So she got for opportunity, let's go to that one. She knew the score and she didn't give up. So we're showing you this to show long-term persistent treatment is significant recovery possible. Okay, and this is an example of consistent effort over time. Doesn't mean she didn't skip a day of treatment, but consistent effort over the long term. And as you saw, some things will improve quickly, but some do not. And improvement is not the same as resolution. I just want to talk about that a little bit, because you'll see when you look at, as we're looking at these cases, that some things improve while some things resolve. They're not necessarily the same, okay? And this lady was facing serious opioid addiction, because this was the only pain meds that would even take the edge off, from what I understand. So now she has to find, not only for her hip, but also because she knows she's addicted to opioids. So the treatment, COMRA Delta 980 nanometer laser device, daily self-treatments for 12 months, and then continued for 3.5 years with breaks, okay? Now she's treating, again, nerve root and along the pathway consistently over time. She's also treating herself systemically. Here's an example of a type of systemic treatment to support that local self-repair in the nerve, as well as her system because of that opioid addiction. All right, so for her, after 1 week, she had a period of a few hours of complete pain relief, and she slept for 6 hours. Now, I want to point this out. Small wins are very important when we look at, instead of, silver bullet where one thing resolves everything. For most people, it's going to be small wins over time, and they're all important to pay attention to, because they can motivate, as you see with this lady. That would be, if you put yourself in her shoes, that would motivate her to take the next step. Oh, I got some pain relief. Okay, what else is possible here? And then after 5 weeks, she had stable pain relief and she was able to stop the pain medication. Now, stop pain medication when it comes to opioids is not just put them down, but now she's got to get off of them. But she's not having to take them for the pain. All right? And with respect to the small details, just to say, and I've often said this to people, becoming your own best health detective to see all the small changes. And that can be challenging, yeah. Now, after that 5 weeks, after 7 months, she was able to stop using the crutches. So you can see now, if you picture that scale, incrementally over time, the scale is tipping to enhanced self-repair, is starting to be able to, the nerve function increasing and return things more closer to normal. And then after 3.5 years, pain in the evenings up to 1 to 3 out of 10, she could walk normally and back to part-time work. So in this case, what I understood from the story was she could walk, and after she walked, let's say 5 or so kilometers, she could tell that would be her barometer. Okay, about 5 kilometers, the pain starts to increase, time to come home. Now, I said earlier that because she'd gone through the physio programs, she'd monitored this. So I want to show you something. This is 10 out of 10 pain here, okay? When she started coma, as she said, the pain went down. She had some periods where she felt better. Now here's a relapse where the pain is getting worse, feeling better. Pain is worse, feeling better. And this last column is a whole year. This is in months, this is in a whole year. So it's not necessarily a fast process. And when nerves are, as I said, are recovering, the function goes up and down as they're trying to find their balance again, all right? Now this is the last case, and I want to show you it's not exactly peripheral nerves, this is an optic nerve, but this is Bronwyn. And at the age of 14, she had a tumor surgery, middle of her brain back here, and they damaged the optic nerves and left her permanently blind in removing the tumor. That's 14 years ago. Why I'm showing you this case is because you don't know how long. A silent nerve doesn't mean a dead nerve, because Bronwyn, let's say indomitable spirit, she refused to give up her idea, her hope that maybe there's some possibility here. And then in 2021, she had an eye exam. They said, look, your eyes are actually still healthy, but the nerve, so the optic nerve is severely damaged. So from there, she said, okay, well, I'm going to look around, see what I can find. And she started with Dr. Clark, and from March 2023, 1 session per week in office for 9 months. And then after that, she continued at home every second day for almost 2 years. Now, as I said, it's not peripheral neuropathy, but this demonstrates long haul over relatively fast recovery. And I'm saying this in terms of expectations, especially 14 years. So they did systemic treatments again, 1 session per week, and along with the eyes, okay? I don't have it here. Bronwyn, this lady, she was kind enough to share her picture. Thank you very much, Bronwyn, for sharing. And after 2 treatments, neck pain was relieved. Not resolved, but relieved. And she was able to stop the pain medication. Now you think about that, she's actively searching and she does something and it's like, my neck feels better. And it was related to the surgery. If that feels better, maybe more can be done. So she had to live in the unknown for the next 3 months. And then all of a sudden she could see sun brightness and angle for the first time in 14 years. In other words, not only that there was light, but she could tell where the light was coming from. And that's huge for her, okay? And then so that motivated her to keep going with treatment. And she, let's say after 2.5 years, light perception, partial color vision, object recognition restored. Pain eliminated, functional recovery, functional navigation recovered. In other words, she can move around her house. Like the quality of life, picture it this way. She has a baby. She goes from blind. Now she can see the baby on the floor, see the toys. Oh, the cupboard's open, close the cupboard, and do those kinds of things So it changed her quality of life or the way she lived dramatically, all right? So this is the cases. And there's much more to Bronwyn's story, by the way. I'm just touching on aspects of all these because there's more to all of them. Real people, real life situations, yeah. So what this brings us to now, when we look at when to use, we'll go into the summary now. We looked at down at the cell level, we looked at the paradigm, the principle, then we looked at it at the cell level, then we looked at enhancing self-repair in terms of at the cell level, then we looked at people and actual situations of overcoming nerve damage by enhancing self-repair. And now we'll go through a summary because I'm sure there's going to be questions people have that are coming up for them right now in terms of, you know, when do you use COMRA for a damaged nerve? We touched on that. And basically, look, if you're experiencing symptoms, anything to do with nerve dysfunction, go ahead, use it. I've had people phone me and they said, you know, I was waiting for the diagnosis, took 2 years to get diagnosed. So now I'm here, I want to use COMRA. And they waited 2 years. I'm saying you don't have to wait those 2 years, okay? And if you have a diagnosis, absolutely. Now, if a nerve is assumed to be irreversibly damaged and other options did not help, okay? What we're saying is you want to give it at least 3 to 6 months. And what I said about the health detective, you want to carefully monitor any change because a small change is indicative of that there's living nerve tissue if there's an improvement, okay? Because you don't know. The challenge here is you don't know if the nerve fiber, that one nerve cell, that 3-foot long guy, is dead and replaced by scar tissue, or if it's at very low function, you see, because when it comes to the nerve and its operation, once the functional repair, or once its, let's say, energy budget gets so low, it goes silent. It says, okay, we need to just hold on to whatever reserves we have left, whatever we can do to stay alive. We're not going to send any more signals. Even if they need to be sent, the priority is to stay alive, not send signals. So silent doesn't mean dead. And this is why I showed you Bronwyn's 14 years of silent. Nobody knew. So with this 3 to 6 months, okay, it doesn't mean just, let's say, if it was my wrist, I'm not going to just put it on my wrist for 6 months without making any changes. If I do this and there's nothing seems to be happening after that first month, 3-4 weeks, get in touch. I get in touch with someone and then say, let's start to make adjustments. What else can we do? Because remember that gentleman where it started at his wrist and went to his shoulder. So if he had got the carpal tunnel diagnosis and just treated his wrist, he might not have got any results. I don't know. But because they looked at the 3 principle approach, they were able to address things from multiple angles, okay? And then we'll always recommend combining local and systemic treatments. In other words, you want to treat where the problem is, but like we saw with the lady with the autonomic neuropathy, let's treat the systems that are implicated because that can often resolve the local symptoms because they're implicated, they're like, let's say, downstream of those systemic effects, and they can be improved with both treatments, okay? Now, let me actually go through this. I touched on the nerve still alive. Yeah, I want to make sure I kind of brought that home, but I think so. Now we go to what to expect. So if you're experiencing, let's say, nerve damage and you're doing other things to support that, whatever they are, you can use, as I said earlier, you can use COMRA with those. That support paradigm works with everything else. Now, a lot of people, they go for surgery and there's a risk of nerve damage because to get in, do different things. So you can use after surgery. I often will say to people, look, if you have COMRA, use COMRA before the surgery because it's kind of a prophylactic. Let's say, get all the self-repair enhanced before you go in, working optimally, then go for the surgery. You probably have a better outcome. It'll help anyway. And then lastly here, to ameliorate damaging effects of radiation, or neurotoxic medication. So basically what we mean there is these toxins are really like down regulating the whole body, like really having a negative effect on it. So you can use Cumra to offset, to mitigate those, because some of the things people have side effects like dry mouth or ulcers or different things. So you can use Cumra in that context too. You don't have to stop doing anything you're doing. You can add the support paradigm to it. That's basically what I'm trying to say, okay? And when it comes to what to expect, I mean, we touched on a lot of different cases to give you a picture of it. If you take Bronwyn, for example, she's 3 months, she had some relief for her neck, but she didn't know anything about what could happen for 3 full months in that unknown. Because a lot of this is entering the unknown and you don't know what can happen, all right? But early symptomatic relief is common, okay, in the first days to week to treatment. So there's a wide range, but this is common. And then after the initial improvement, relapses, definitely possible, especially if you have sensory symptoms where you don't feel, let's say you can't tell what temperature anything is anymore. When that nerve starts to improve its function, it's highly likely that from no sensation, can't tell the temperature, this is going to go to there's some sort of pain. So in that, there's strategies to make that more manageable, but it can definitely happen, okay? And what you'll notice is, let's say, if this is first improvement, this is where you start. First improvement, then there'll be a relapse. And the improvement comes up, it's a little bit better, and then the relapse. Anyway, I'm not very good at drawing, but what I'm trying to show, you is the increment, the degree of relapse will be less each time, and the duration will get shorter and shorter. So you can picture a ripple as it goes out, it gets less and less, okay? Why some people recover faster than others, people often ask, and that has to do with a whole host of different things. How much damage, what kind of scar tissue, what other kind of health challenges does the individual have, how long has it been there, how much is dead versus damaged, because from our perspective, once the nerve is replaced by scar tissue, then from our perspective, there's nothing we can do. Because there's no self-repair to enhance, because there is no nerve, there's scar tissue, okay? Now, this other part here, I'll put it the way it's on the slide and then I'll talk about it differently. You see, in cases of chronic or severe nerve damage, plan for months to years of gradual recovery, as you could see from the doctor who went through the surgery as an example. Their first priority is to slow down the degradation. So you can picture that those scales are way off. Pain, numbness, motor issues, all kinds of things are happening. So you're trying to offset, slow down that degradation, tip those scales as much as possible this way. What that means is that degradation, if left to continue, will just keep going. So slowing that down means, let's say, making the slope more gradual. And what that means, let's say, like one of the factors for healing is to do with age. A 14-year-old girl is going to heal a lot more efficiently than the 69-year-old lady. Okay? So this is about making that curve more gradual to hold on to quality of life for longer as much as possible. And for some people, they won't make it past that first priority. It's just real. A lot of people will go from first priority to second priority, and that is to stabilize. So instead of the graph, let's say it was like this, you made it like this, now let's flatten it out. In other words, the self-repair can now balance out the nerve damage, but there will be nerves that are dead, like in that, let's say, one nerve cell, 3 feet long, but there'll be a bundle of those together, thousands of them. So some of those are going to be dead, which means not all function will be able to be recovered. Dead nerve doesn't transmit any signals, but the ones next to it that are damaged certainly do, and they are sending out alarm signals in lots of cases. So getting that to stabilization would be second priority, and some people, that's as good as it will get, for sure. Okay, but if you consider a chronic degenerative condition and you're able to either slow its progress or stabilize it so it doesn't get any worse, and your function, let's say symptoms will improve, okay, this is a huge win. And some people will progress to this third stage, as in this third priority, where not only do we level the, let's say, the scales, but now we start to tip them this way, where the function not only stabilizes, but it starts to improve. So let's say in the second one, your leg doesn't get any worse in terms of what you can do with it, for, let's say if it's a motor issue, but it doesn't improve, would be second. The third one, it goes from stable to starts to improve. You take that gentleman, so he could start to oppose his thumb and finger. That's huge improvement. Whereas pain relief and didn't get any, the muscle didn't atrophy anymore, that would be a stabilization, okay? And I guess you could look at them, this would be, let's say, third prize, second prize, first prize. I put it that way to people sometimes. That's another way you could look at it, yeah. So this is, you know, what to expect. And there's a whole range, very broad swath across here, okay? Now, I brought up the three principle approach, and this is about where to apply chromotherapy. Now, there's, you know, as we saw, there's lots of diagrams with mannequins to show you the points, and there's more detail. I just omitted the detail for us here today. But basically, if you take principle one, what we're saying is treat the nerves in the area where you experience pain, tingling, numbness, etc. Okay? That's the first one. The second one is treat that highway, that damage, the nerve pathway, back to the root and including the root. So headquarters, transportation system, and the outpost, put it that way, okay? And the third one, and we touched on that in a few cases today of people's experience, is treat the condition that causes the nerve or caused the nerve damage. We had the diabetes, so you can see here, treating the pancreas, okay? And some of the enteric nerve system, vagus nerve, these kind of things. So this is the three principle approach we touched on. It's in our neuropathy ebook. Now, people will often ask, well, how do you know which device to choose? So to put this in, let's say, general terms, again, individual, as we say in the bottom, individual responses vary. The 905, okay, Coma Pro 905 is going to be the most direct acting. We'll just say most direct acting. The 980 will be less direct, more gradual, more gentle of an approach. Some people may need the effects of the 905, but their system is too depleted and cannot handle it. So you'll see here, kind of starting at the bottom, in case of degenerative or nerve damage, start with the 980 laser and then switch to the 905. So this will be the case for a certain number of people, all right? 905, why I say direct acting, because it acts directly on that tissue and it's going to have the fastest effect, generally speaking. With that, that means if something's, let's say, asleep, it's going to wake up faster. But that also means it will be very uncomfortable. So this is why we kind of talk about starting with the 980. And 905 is going to be what most clinicians will be using, because when people go to a clinic, they're a limited time, etc., etc. Whereas in a home setting, the 980 can be very effective. I mean, you can also use 980 in a clinic, and some people do, but generally speaking, they're going to use 905. And Coma Palm in a home setting, also with a 980 nanometer laser. Sorry for the technical jargon. That's referring to the wavelength of the laser, I'm just saying it here because if anyone looks further, they won't have any point of reference for this, so I want to mention it here. We have people who come, and some can afford to get the 905, some can't. And they say, well, I can only afford the Cobra Palm. And that's fine, because remember what we talked about with the first, second, and third priorities. The Cobra Palm, and some people never need more than that, and they're like, this is great. The Cobra Palm can deliver very good benefits in these kind of situations. But the 905 Pro, as we call it, this, as I said, let's just say it will dig a little deeper. It'll get into things that the Cobra Palm can't, but that might not be what you need. You might not need the Cobra Pro. So it's hard to say it cut and dry because there's a lot of factors. Age, basically the same things that people said, why some outcomes this way and some that way. Those same factors come into which of these is going to be best suited to you. And there's a number of people who say, okay, I'm kind of tentative. They'll start with the Cobra Palm, and then after they see those initial benefits, they're like, okay, yeah, I want to get the 905 now. I want to move on to that. So this can also happen for people, okay? There's a lot of variation. And then just to touch on safety, all right? As I said already, you can use this with whatever medications you're using, any other type of therapies you're doing, no problem. If you're not sure, you can always ask. There's no contraindication, so there's no situation where we're like, do not use this. That being said, there are circumstances. So if someone has a pacemaker or a neurostim, we're going to say you want to stay a foot to, which is 30 centimeters away from that, okay? Remember, this support paradigm is not in opposition to any other paradigm, so it's totally safe. And remember, when we talked about those low-level radiances, what we're saying is they're not going to, they cannot harm or damage any tissue that you apply it to, okay? So it's totally safe. Now, a lot of people will often ask, well, what does this look like day to day? So what support looks like day to day, I'm using the example from the doctor who had the post-surgery from the sciatic nerve cauterization. Excuse me. So if you look at her on a Monday, she does treatment 1, 22 minutes in the morning, treatment 2, 23 minutes in the evening. Same thing on Tuesday. Wednesday, she's got to go out, so she does both treatments in the evening. Thursday, she splits them up in the day. Friday, she does them in the morning because she's going out in the evening. Sunday, she takes the day off. Maybe the next week, she misses a day. Just something came up, and then she just didn't feel like doing treatment. You see, that consistency is not about never missing a day. It's about sticking with it over time because it can take time to get the results, okay? This is just one example. There's huge variation on what a week-to-week looks like. I just want to give you some indication. So finally, at the beginning, just to come to this, I'd given you a little friendly warning. And I'd said, you know, once you see this, you can't unsee it, all right? What I mean by this is you now are aware of the normal functioning of the nerve and the self-repair. And in the old paradigm, not old, but in the control paradigm, which is 100% valid. Why I say old is the one, let's say, that we're used to, and now we just had a new view. In the control and replace paradigm, wait and see makes sense, okay? But why I say you can't unsee this now is because there is something that can be done to enhance the self-repair rather than simply waiting to see. And why I gave you this as kind of a friendly warning is because what it points to, okay, and I'm just going to be frank, there's a cost to waiting and seeing, and that cost is viable nerve tissue can die in that time. Because remember I said viable tissue is still there, the signal may be silent, but it's doing everything it can to survive to a point. At a certain point, it'll actually, okay, it's time I need to die properly, we'll say for the cells. They need to do it they want to do it in a certain way because then it's beneficial for the rest of the body, more beneficial. So there's a cost of lost opportunity, okay? And I'm not look, I don't care if you go with Comra or whatever you do. I just want to show you this so that you know you can do something, and that's the opportunity there. That's all. Doesn't matter what you do. I just wanted to show you that. That's the main thing, okay? Viable tissue, something could happen. So what happens next? Well, if you'd like more information, you can go to our website, comra-therapy.com. Okay, if you do not have a neuropathy ebook, see the description below. So comra-therapy.com/resources, okay? If you have any questions, please drop us a line, support@comra-therapy.com. With your questions, we will respond to every inquiry, okay? And if you have questions about getting started, there's protocols, there's videos, there's documents, there's chats, there's text messages, there's WhatsApp, there's video meetings, there's telephone calls, whatever is needed to support whoever it is to move along that process of exploring that unknown for themselves. We're there to do that with you, okay? Now, when it comes to post-webinar communications, there was a couple of things, this webinar, as you see, we're at 72 minutes. There was some scope we had to cut, all right? So we had said some things in our announcements that we decided, look, let's take this out of here. We will follow up in email communications with you with that material we decided not to put in the webinar because this is already very long. And you will get the webinar recording via email as well. So check your inbox. If you don't see, check your junk folder, just in case. And because a lot of people sent us requests and joined up and different things, I don't know how many showed up, I don't see. We're going to put on part 2, February 10th, 2026 at 12 p.m. New York time, same as today. And we'd love to see you there. If you feel you want to be there, that's great. So I just want to say we covered a lot of ground here. Yeah, so we have the recording, fortunately. So thank you for your time and attention. And we're going to open the floor up for questions now. I just want to say to all those people who sent in their questions before, thank you very much. We did our best to weave your questions into the presentation. Okay, so we feel we've addressed them, but that doesn't mean you feel they're addressed. So if you still don't feel your question is addressed through what we've presented so far, by all means, let us know either in the chat today or send us an email. We'll probably follow up with you anyway. I'm pretty sure we will, just to make sure everybody who sent in questions is satisfied. And again, thank you for those. They were very, very helpful. Okay, that's it for me from now. Thank you. Maxim, are there any questions?
Yes, Gareth, there is quite a few questions. I will be focusing on the topic of the presentation because there are some questions outside of the topic, but also about Comra therapy. And also we'll try to make them varied, let's say, areas so that you can cover as much as possible. So the first question would be, what can you say about phantom pains and addressing phantom pains, whether it helps or not?
Thank you for the question about phantom pain. So without going too deep into the particulars, you see the nerves are interconnected with the vascular tissue. In other words, the blood supply. And when there is a constriction or problem with the blood supply that both supplies the nerves and tissue it's innervating, then you can get pain signals that, let's say in fibromyalgia, for example, or phantom pain, where the pain is there, But when you go to look at it as in find a diagnosis, there's nothing they can actually see per se. So this is one aspect. And then there's another aspect of this, and I don't know if this goes directly to your question, but you see, before people are diagnosed with neuropathy proper, a lot of times they'll be like, my feet are burning, or what's going on? I have this pain. And they go to the doctor and they check it out and they go, we don't see anything. Neuropathy doesn't just turn on like a switch. It builds up for many people for years, silently, and then intermittent signals, phantom pains, different things happening, until suddenly it's to the point where it's there all the time. So, yeah.
Can I add, Garrett, something?
Please. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Arjan. We had a Comra clinic here in Altai area. We didn't have exactly phantom pain, but if it is in a case of, let's say, amputation and the limb is missing, what it means that the nerve, well, actually several thousands of nerves that are innervating the limb were also damaged. So if the nerve is damaged, they will generate pain signal. You see, so we will approach the treatment with Comra therapy in just the same way. In other words, we will be treating the area where there was, let's say, the amputation, where the nerve was actually cut, all the way along the way to the spine. And if needed, if there is, let's say, for example, what they call central sensitization, then we'll be treating as also the brain. But approach will be the same in this case. Thank you.
Thank you.
Garrett, this is also another question that we have on this topic exactly is, okay, so if there is a central sensitization issue, or let's say doctor is suspecting this, what would you do? How you would approach? Because, for example, you treated something already, you treated what you, let's say, thought might help, but it has not helped. And doctor says it might be a central sensitization. What you do with
Well, just to touch on it initially, when you looked at the lady with the autonomic neuropathy, one of the things to do is go system-wide. This would be one step, because as we saw with her, let's say dealing with the whole system, addressing the whole system, starts to calm it down. In other words, the nerve tension across the board starts to come down to more normal factors. And with central, let's say, central sensitization, it's going to need to be more systemic treatment. Yeah. I don't know if anybody wants to add something to that.
Look, Garrett, if we in this presentation you talked a lot about the peripheral neuropathy, meaning damage to the peripheral nerves. But when we talk about something like Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, or any type of damage which influences the spinal cord, the brain, then I would suggest looking in the user guide, the treatment for Parkinson's. And that would be the approach. Basically, we'll be placing the Comra device all along the spine, from neck down to coccyx. So along the spine, then both sides, left and to the right from the spine, to treat the roots of the nerve and the brain itself directly. So if we suspect it's involved, the central nervous system is involved in the process, in pain, for example, and we'll be just treating as like that. The bottom line, what I would like to say, because Garrett, I'm looking at the questions in the chat, and a lot of people asking how to treat this and can I treat this. You see, with Comra therapy, because it's completely safe, it's non-invasive, it will not hurt you if you treat it wrongly, so to speak. In other words, if you suspect something is involved, let's say root nerve is compressed, treat there, continue the protocol for at least 3, 4, 5 weeks perhaps. If there is improvement, it means you're spot on. If there is no change in symptom whatsoever, change your strategy. Bottom line is that don't be afraid to try variations of the Comra protocol. And actually, all the time we are recommending trying different approaches with Comra therapy. As long as we understand, we have a general idea which organ is involved, which nerve is involved, and where possibly is the problem. Is it a pinched nerve? Is it a systemic process like diabetes? Or is it a central process, like, for example, like in Parkinson's? So that's why we say, okay, go to your neurologist, have them do their tests, and perhaps they have an idea, where is the problem. And then with Comra therapy, you can start treating directly, meaning put the device directly to the area where we suspect there is a problem. And if there is improvement in your condition, it means you're spot on. So it's very simple.
Thank you, Arjan.
Garrett, another related question. Participant is asking about a case of vagotomy, vagus nerve, let's say, severed near stomach, and problems with digestion and anxiety, heart rate, and so on. What can be done in the case of let's say, post-surgery, this kind of consequences?
Did you say it was severed or severe? Sorry, Maxim.
As I understand, this was vagotomy, which means...
you said vagotomy. Okay. So if the vagus nerve is removed, I personally, I don't know.
Only ending, not only part which...
Okay, so they removed it to alleviate pain in some area, or try to symptom control. So if the same thing comes down to what Arjan said, at least from my perspective, with respect to the phantom pain, in terms of if the nerve is cut, there can be damage there. It would heal itself as best as possible, but that can be supported. And then there'd be basically systemic treatments, and I'm going to come back to this again, because if you picture you remove that end of the vagus nerve, it has a function, so it was deemed, okay, let's remove it because it's better to do it that way. The rest of the body is going to compensate. So it's like there's extra work for the rest of the body to compensate for that, let's say, missing piece, and it will adapt to the best of its ability. So it would involve supporting the rest of the systems that are compensating. So you saw, again, same thing with that lady with the autonomic neuropathy, which is very related to what you're saying, and the systemic treatments. We will keep coming back to those because the system's got to offset this situation. And then whatever the symptoms are, you can also start addressing those that you're still experiencing. So not just systemic, but also where those symptoms are can also be addressed. Thank you.
Yeah, Garrett, there is a comment in the chat that the vagus nerve was cauterized to alleviate excess acid production. It was 40 years ago. So that long time ago, we don't know. Simple answers, we don't know. Do the treatments, see if anything can be done. If nothing can be done in terms of the nerve repair, then at least apply Comra palliatively just to compensate for those deficits developed due to nerve damage. This is also completely possible and doable, and we certainly recommend it when nothing can be done in terms of the nerve damage itself.
Garrett, another question is this. There is a treatment of foot and lower leg, which possibly connected to infection, bacteria, fungus, or anything. Will Comra in any way increase or decrease bacteria, fungus? How that works?
Okay, thank you for that question. As you saw with the zoster, and I mentioned, Comra doesn't directly act on any fungus or bacteria or virus. What it does is it supports the body to increase its function, and through that increase of function, through the nerve's increase of function in the case we saw, it resolves the challenge. So it would be the same thing with, let's say, with the neuropathy in the foot and infection. That being said, again, as Arjan mentioned, see your doctor, and they might have strategies that they say, look, we want to do this, this, and this to fight the infection, and you still can use Comra with that. You're going to want to treat the blood, because the blood is going to be implicated in there. You're going to want to treat that nerve pathway, the tissues in the area, and the immune system overall, because just like the nerve has its own self-repair and functional levels, so too the immune system. And so there's treatments that can be done to increase the efficiency of the immune system, and that is what in turn starts to deal with the viral, fungal, bacterial infections. But nothing about Comra directly acts on those. So you're not going to increase them through using Comra. There's no, that it doesn't work that way. Yeah. I don't know if anybody else has anything they want to add to that. Thank you very much for the question.
Well, Comra therapy, it actually works on supporting the immune system. And by supporting the immune system, the body itself will fight off the infection, be it bacterial, be it fungi, be it viral, be it COVID, or any other infection. Because Comra is not invasive, and it certainly will not destroy in a direct way certain pathogen, for example. It will not eliminate anything from the system directly. Rather, we come in very gently and we support the immune cells, the immune-competent organs to do their job, and they will fight off the infection. So simple as that.
Thank you, Gareth. Thank you, Arjan. One probably of the last questions, we still have many, but time is coming up. So the question is this. One person or a participant is asking, I was treating a patient with narrow vision, and which was very narrow, like a very small area. And after several treatments or after some time, the vision field increased to, let's say, baseball size. And patient told that it is too long, or it's taking too much time for that one. How you would address that, or what you would recommend in terms of those expectations?
Thank you for that question. So, I mean, managing, let's say, patient expectations for anybody in a clinic, and we'll get into that a little more in the next webinar. It might take some education in terms of, as we talked about in the webinar, there's a wide swath, we'll say, from very little response to major response, and then there's another wide swath of time factors involved in that. And then there's also the thing that people don't necessarily understand what they're actually dealing with, because let's say I referred earlier to progress rather than resolution. So there are situations where it'll just progress slowly over time, or it won't fully resolve. So people may have come in with expectations. So getting clear on those, so those can be addressed, let's say more, I'm not saying they weren't addressed realistically, but helping people shift the focus. So they go to, oh, this is like really serious. I didn't realize how serious. I just thought, I go to the doctor, things will get better, or I go see the therapist, things will get better. But when they understand the gravity of the situation, not to scare anyone, but just so they can see it realistically, then they can be more cooperative to go through those processes that are, you see, the unknown. And it's a very uncomfortable place for people to be, is in that unknown where they don't know what's going to happen. So this is part of also the helping people navigate through that, just as support. And it's not always easy. So yeah, I don't know if anybody wanted to add. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I also got it. Part of this story is to shift the focus because when a person has to travel across the city to visit a clinic for a treatment, for example, whatever it takes, 20 minutes, 30-minute coma treatment, and then he goes back home, and it happens, let's say, once a week, maybe twice a week, and there's a certain process, like we saw in case of Broadway. Uh, but that dynamic, which is happening and which is good and it should be supported, but it changes once the person has the device at home because nervous system is the slowest regenerating part of our body, most complex and the slowest repairing itself by far, absolutely. So any improvement we can get as a bonus. So if a person is convinced, yes, the therapy works, but now I want more and what to do, the best way is to have the device at home. This is, we worked in a clinic for 3 years where thousands of patients come in, but every time I saw the same and again the same story when a person realizing, look, I can actually do it at home any time of the day I can. It's very convenient, very easy. Why don't I do it at home? And then this long term, when it continues for 6 months, for 12 months, for 3 years, like case of Broadway, then it makes sense to make this procedure to be done at home. And again, any gain here is a huge bonus because currently with medication, with the pharmaceutical methods, we're pretty much facing just wait and see approach.
Thank you. Garrett, there are still many questions. Would you like to wrap up or continue with that one, and or we will have an email series covering them all?
Because there's a lot, we don't want to leave any unaddressed. So my preference would be that we address them all, but we won't get to it today, so we can do it in email follow-up. If any individual who we do the follow-up with would like to have more conversation about that, aside from email, we can certainly do that. In other words, we can get on a video call and discuss it, or a phone call, whatever we'd need to do to address the questions. Yeah, why not? Or we can have another webinar follow. We just have a follow-up meeting to this one. I don't know what it'll look like because I can't see the questions, but definitely let's address them all. But I would like to close the meeting now. We've been here an hour and a half. Unless there's only one or two left, but from what you said, there's a lot. So
No, we haven't touched half of the questions.
okay. So thank you everybody for all of your questions. We will address them, and we will do whatever you need to follow up. Yeah, we'll do what we can to do that. Thank you very much for your participation today and your attention. And I truly hope that this serves you or someone you know. Okay, bye-bye for now.